The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it, the weekend editions here at Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Mark Kraynak is not on assignment. He will be joining us in a moment. He is having his own computer difficulties as Walter has chimed in off the top rope. We love you, Walter. They're late as usual.
You know it's bad.
Listen,
it's bad when Brandon Vogel is in the green room whenever we're starting the show. That's like,
It's too bad. I sent out a tweet, and it's what I wanted to do to the studio computer. Elijah was dealing with the studio computer, and that thing was on all sorts of meltdown. It's probably still Windows 98. I'm not going to lie to anybody, and you got to put a quarter in the machine. Brandon Vogel is with us from Counter Read. counterread.com. Vogues, how we doing? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
I'm doing well. Absent technical difficulties so far, so I guess maybe had a leg up on you to start things.
Yeah, I've never seen, like, the computer screen I came in here, it's just black, and then whenever I turn the computer on, like the classic turn it off and turn it on again, Windows did not restart correctly. What does that mean? What does that? I've never seen that one before. So then I got to go through the restart process all over again. And we eventually get it right. And we have all our radio production stuff on this. So that's got to get restarted and booted up. And it was a whole thing. But we're here. We're rocking on a Saturday morning. And that's what's really important, you know. We made it.
Yeah, it's important. We love Vogues popping in and talking some ball with us. Brandon looks at it with the beer being half full. It's Saturday. There's no start time. That's what makes it special and fun. Good on you, Brandon. So Brandon's asking, is Kraynak going to give us a rundown of the Daytona? What happened to the 47? I think Eric has all that lowdown for us. Got caught up in a late wreck, finished 31st.
Yeah, this was brutal. I was rooting hard for Stenhouse. He was my adoptive driver last weekend. Thank you, Eric, for sending us that jersey again. And this was tough. We're talking about, what was it, just over 10 laps to go. You have the big one at Daytona, and Stenhouse had dropped to the back of the pack just a little bit. Didn't like how the leaders were racing, I believe is what the team radio said. And he was navigating his way through the big one and just got clipped on the back right and ended up getting spun, got hit from behind. It was tough to see as a guy who really thought he was racing well. He was back up into the top 10, was kind of biding his time all race long. So, Eric, we were rooting for you. At least I was. I'm not sure if anyone else was, but I was rooting for Stenhouse.
No, we wanted Stenhouse to get it handed.
That was tough. I was a little bit disappointed when I was sitting here in the studio watching, and you see the big one, and first thought is, what happened to Stenhouse? Is he all right? And he was fine from a medical point of view, but he just got clipped on that back right, and it was kind of tough to see. I was thinking if he would have made it through that, he would have had a good chance to go back-to-back at Daytona. But alas, that's racing for you.
Vogues, 63 days till the spring game, because the countdown always is on, and you've got a lot of things going on. You've got a countersuit from Tennessee, and that is interesting. There was some news on that yesterday, and first and foremost, gloves are off. It looks like with the NCAA and their ability to govern some things. You got the EA Sports. Here's some money. Be on the video game news this week. And by the way, Matt Rule made 1 and 2, not just 1, but 2 appearances at coaching clinics this week. Our friends Mark Waller and Jim Hansen did the Lincoln Football Coaches Association Wednesday. They had Rule and Coop and Glenn Thomas out there. Well, the Omaha Coaches Clinic had Coach White, and a couple of other coaches. I don't remember the exact names in Omaha, but Rule was there to say what's up, hang out a little bit, and then get in his car and go do the same thing. We were talking with Mitch Sherman about this earlier this week, but the dedication's great, and the talent pool keeps growing in the state of Nebraska, outside the metro and inside the metro. Pretty cool to see the coaches and hear the coaches' response to Rule and what he does, and that's give him time and just spend time with him.
Yeah, I was actually just reading Mitch's story at the Athletic before I came on. I didn't quite make it to the end yet, so apologies if I missed something that in the half that I haven't read. But really good story. It stuck out to me. It seems like kind of an obvious message when you stop and think about it, but it's one I don't think you hear very often from coaches. According to Mitch's write-up, Rule was out there saying we need to make football fun, and in an era where you're seeing decreased participation, that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of times, I think football classically, not that it matters like what it was like in when I was in high school forever ago, but it was kind of that rite of passage thing, the two-a-days thing, where it's like, yeah, this has to be hard and you have to kind of hate it, which I think there's value in those things, certainly. But if you want to kind of secure participation going forward, make it a little bit fun. And I mean, I think we're seeing that happen at Nebraska too. Rule's not just talking about at the high school level with that.
Well, here's a question. In Matt Rule's first 15 months on the job, talks about making football fun, obviously in reference to his players, the guys in the team, but has it been fun for you, the fan? People sitting at home watching on TV? Has Matt Rule made Husker football more fun?
That's a great question, and I'd be interested in what the fans thought about that, because there's such a spectrum of people out there that for a lot of people, I think, or maybe not a lot, definitely there was a section that was like 5-7, a bunch of close losses. This is kind of the same thing again, right? That said, I think there you go. That said, I think you'll always give a coach kind of the benefit of the doubt in a year one scenario. So for the people that were a little bit more willing to I guess live with a couple of losses now, I think it was fun, but it's interesting because it's not like the no-brainer answer to that would be like, yeah, they went 8-4 or they went 9-3, a kind of Bo Pelini type first year. That definitely, I think, would have been considered fun then.
Mr. Kraynak is with us, a.k.a. Punctual Pete. You're good.
That was my nickname growing up.
I'm sure. We were...
For some reason, I don't believe that.
No, we had computer problems at the home office, so we're good. Vogues is in with us. Vogues beat us here. We're talking about the topic.
That is not good. When the guest beats you to your own show... You got to think.
That's the scope of the computer problems. So, is football fun or making football fun a topic that we're on? Is Matt Rule doing that? He spoke about it at the coaches' clinics this week. He spent time out in Lincoln and Omaha, and Big Red Junkies nailed it with their comment just a little bit ago that winning is fun. Guys, you know how much goes into football. The fact that there's spring football, the fact there's winter conditioning, there's summer conditioning, there's 4 practices and 80 walkthroughs and 400 meetings, and you get one game. I mean, all the work you have to put in for it, for 60 plays, 70 plays. If you're running hurry up, maybe you get 75 or 80 plays, right? And there's only 11 of you. There's one quarterback. There's one running back. So did Rule make football fun in year one? I think the defense was a ton of fun to watch. They were a lot of fun to watch. I loved watching them tackle. That also goes to winning the football. The defensive side of the football gave you an opportunity to win every Saturday for the most part. kept you in about every ball game you were in. It's the offense that was not fun to watch. There were moments where you hit a big play, and that was fine.
Unless you're like a masochist or something, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you've had just, all right, how are they going to score here? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but, throw it deep to Malachi or Jalen. Yeah, or let Hurrdat keep it on an option. Let him run. So one side of the football was absolutely fun to watch. The other side, they're working on it, is my point. But Rhule's attitude and communication ability makes this thing fun to cover again.
Well, I think you are kind of hitting on the key challenge, not just for Rhule, but for football coaches in general. And, there's only a couple places in the country where maybe this isn't the case. And I think if those are anomalies. Like, broadly speaking, when you just lay out like all the practices, all the off-season workouts, like just the sheer time commitment, all for the 60, 70 plays you get on Saturday, like you got to really love doing that. And then when you think about it from particularly with Nebraska, which carries a larger roster size, how do you make that the case for 120 guys where it's everybody wants to come there? I think it's sent me back to one of the first things Rhule said about he just wants the guys to be around each other and like hanging around each other. I think that's probably the key way to do it. And that's tough to do too, to get 120 people all to like each other perfectly, but you get as close as you can. And so I think, a lot of what we've heard from Rhule, you can kind of see the philosophy behind it, and it just makes some simple sense.
And probably a part of it too that you're not able to, he probably wouldn't say out loud, at least not right now, but right now the kids are getting paid for the first time in their lives, something that they've obviously worked pretty hard on through junior high, through high school, just to get to this point. Now somebody's paying them for it with like some cool uniforms. Like, it might be pretty easy, not easy, but pretty easy to get motivated, to get ready to roll and have some fun with that. Yeah.
I mean, that's I hadn't thought of that angle to it, but that's a key piece of it too. Like, how many more people does that keep involved? Because it's nothing's fun all the time, of course. There are going to be days where it's like, I guess we got to get up and do this, even though this is the thing I've worked my entire life to do. And if you, there are different ways to be compensated for that work. And for the first time in NCAA's long history, actually being compensated is on the table.
I was, Punctual Pete was a little late today, surprisingly. So I don't know if we got into that yet. The NCAA, the court ruling against the NCAA, which lifted kind of all limits on boosters. Have we gone there yet?
We threw the line in the water. We were going to go that direction for sure. Okay.
I think we just got there.
Yeah, we did.
I think it just steered us in that direction.
I have got a moment of silence here for all the bagmen Johnny Football called out this week on the Shannon Sharp podcast, because now you don't need them anymore.
No, they can just be open.
That's a whole career, just a whole field of jobs down the drain.
That's
NCAA football bagman, man.
It's like the wolf in Pulp Fiction.
Listen,
the
these
ultimate
folks,
fixer.
They no longer have to live in shame and in the shadows. They can be right out front.
There was no shame.
Well, obviously there wasn't any of that. And for folks that don't know, but it was a court ruling which said, hey, NCAA, which has been trying to regulate and trying to have some sort of order within NIL, saying you can't take money from boosters or anybody like that until you sign your letter of intent. And then once you do that, you're free to do it. NCAA's like, no. Or the court's like, no. That's not how the free market works. And that's something that people forget, as we're talking about all this, is like free market society. Free market society, free market society. Like, you can't do insider trading outside of that. You can't sell drugs outside of that. You can kind of, make money. However, from whoever. If somebody wants to give you money, they can. You better just report it, and you better pay taxes on it. I mean, those are kind of the rules. So that's all lifted now. Brandon, there was a lot of doomsday commentary after that for the NCAA as an institution, which surprised me a little bit. Is that overblown, like the demise of the entire organization of the NCAA, or are you buying into that a little bit? Like this is sort of another reason why the NCAA itself is going to no longer exist here and soon.
I mean, I don't think it's quite the death blow that it was portrayed in some cases. I guess my thought is this ruling is kind of residual from previous leadership at the NCAA, where they basically waited until the night before the test to do anything at all as far as NIL. That was clearly coming, meaning they waited for some sort of legislative solution to it. The federal government said, no, we're going to stay out of this one. And it was basically, at that point, Nebraska's NIL law went into effect that day. There were a handful of others. And it was like totally chaos. There was nobody minding the store. The NCAA has come back in and is now trying to mind the store. And essentially the ruling the other day was like, no, you still need to get your stuff together and figure out what you're going to be. I think the new NCAA president, Charlie Baker, with his history as a politician, essentially, maybe there's a chance that he can kind of plot a new course. But it's clear that everything that came to this point, they're still waiting for the NCAA to basically come up with its own solutions, I guess, is what yesterday said to me.
My 2 cents on the NCAA and their authority or authority is that they have for years printed money under the nonprofit umbrella, even though they've been for profit, and they have controlled the NCAA tournament. They've controlled all aspects. It took, the bowl coalition, or it took the college football playoff, breaking off to have their own rules and have their own arms around the money. So. And they have just continued to kick the can down the road concession-wise so they can keep some of their properties and keep earning their money. That's it. They have not cared until they've had to care about student athletes and money, and they have been very flimsy with their enforcement because they've not hired more people to be able to enforce. I mean, they've just tried to stay in power, and they've conceded where they've needed to concede the last 20 years. And away you go. I'm glad they're going away. And is the new boss going to be better? I don't know, but people are going to get paid. We'll see if this sport survives.
So, okay, I think this is an important discussion, though. I know what you're saying, and the NCAA is like easy to vilify,
to hate on. Sure.
But
I just I guess, Kraynak, we're in college, right? And you and I are starting out in this industry. And what was the big, oh no? Well, they were gonna bench Crouch for a year because he had a freaking ham sandwich.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, somebody down in the SEC is driving a Trans Am. And he's playing every day.
But the thing that gets overlooked a lot in this discussion, I think, the NCAA exists at the pleasure of the universities, like
and the presidents
and right. Like it is a representative body that the schools themselves created to regulate themselves. right? So there's no
it's like the Tobacco Institute in the movie Thank You for Smoking. It's the Tobacco Institute started by the tobacco companies.
That's what it is. So like the schools can be as critical as they want towards the NCAA, which they opt into, right? Like it's their legislative body. It's their rules, right? So like you're sort of It's like, I guess if you're in high school or something, it's maybe you getting pissed at your student council, or it's similar to like maybe as a voter, you being like, yeah, Congress pisses me off, right? Like, okay, but it's your vote. That's your government. That's your vote. That's your thing. So I wonder if the NCAA's name is so soiled at this point. The brand is so like watered down and so universally disliked. You just kind of got to rebrand the thing because you're going to have some. You're going to have some regulations.
Some governing body. You need some governing body.
Yeah.
But what do you guys
at the pleasure
want?
Of the schools?
Well, does it?
What do you want from a governing body standpoint?
Does it not feel though like with the direction, like the lack of respect that the NCAA kind of gets from the college football media landscape and seemingly the teams? It almost feels like we're bound for. And we talked about Andrew Jackson on President's Day, and I'm going to go back to history. I'm a big history guy. I love it. It was Andrew Jackson who famously, I believe it was Court Justice Marshall, I believe. They made a ruling that Andrew Jackson didn't like, and he essentially said, the courts made their ruling, now let them enforce it. I think that's a point we're going to come down to at some point in time, whether it's the Big Ten and SEC advisory committee, or maybe it's just a school, that eventually I think the NCAA is going to make a ruling and someone's just going to say, well, we don't like you, we're not going to listen to it. Like, I feel like that's the direction we're headed in, despite the fact that, as Mark says, like, the schools are the ones that kind of made the NCAA. They're the ones that set up the governing body. Yet it just feels like we're bound for a time that somebody is going to feel more powerful than the NCAA as a whole, and you think that's going to be SEC and Big Ten. They're going to say, all right, you've made a ruling, enforce it. We're going to go play or whatnot. Right? Is that
and
not
you need
bound?
us, by the way, because people watch us.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I think the NCAA, while not perfect, of course, broadly works for every sport except FBS football, where it really, that's even more of kind of a, yeah, we'll agree to use your rules because we need somebody to write the rules and enforce them. But that's really kind of it. And as college football already at the top level, at the top of the top level, I mean, we know, we see where this is headed. Between the Big Ten and the SEC, it already looks like very professional. And we're just barely into the 12-team playoff era, the transfer portal era, the NIL era. So that I could see, you know, as power probably continues to consolidate, the Big Ten and the SEC basically be like, yeah, we're going to you'd basically be creating a new NCAA. As to Mark's point, like everybody opted into this for a reason. It's because you need some regulation.
Right.
Could you do that for the FBS subdivision as a whole? Maybe. It's a lot easier to do if you're talking about maybe the top 30 or 40 teams that are like, yep, this is who we're going to hire essentially to create and police the sport, and that's what we're going with.
Rebrand it like Players United or something like that. Yeah. Oh, this is great now. Yeah, it's clear what they stand for.
Yeah, I mean, you would probably see if we got to an era where we're like, there's a subdivision above the football bowl to subdivision that's just the top 40 teams or whatever. You would probably see a players union type of thing, because that's very important, you know, for the professional leagues. Now they don't have to worry about, you know, recruiting piece of it, which helps, but a players union becomes kind of your check on the rules that are in place.
And that's kind of the story that you can combine with this court ruling from this week. Was a couple weeks ago, a court ruled that the Dartmouth men's basketball team was allowed to unionize as they were considered employees of the university, which I don't think necessarily got the run. It was somewhat expected that was going to be the ruling, but I don't think that necessarily got the national media attention that maybe it should for the magnitude of the fact that a court ruled, you know what, these guys are being essentially treated as employees of the university, therefore they're allowed to unionize. That was a big ruling that kind of got swept under the rug. It's not a fun story, but it is really interesting in how it could shift the landscape of college football and college sports as a whole.
Well, and yet Dartmouth, that's private, Ivy League, and away you go. But it's step one for a bigger university and public university to go that route if they want. But we're on kind of a new frontier with where this world's going, and all we really want is give me a money 11 o'clock game, give me a money 2:30 game. I need a 6 p.m. I need an 8 p.m. and I need an after dark. I need 5 to 6 really awesome games 12 times a year. Vie for a playoff spot. What's that?
Why stop at 12? The NFL's figured out 17 with a smaller roster.
What's that path to the playoff look like where we're currently sitting as it looks more NFL-ish? And what's our roster and talent level look like? Can you compete to be in the mix in November? Can you be a top 4 team, let's just say, in the Big Ten, year in and year out? Not every year is going to be a playoff appearance if you're Nebraska, but get to that point in time where you're good enough to be. So that's the here and now. But it's going to continue to zoom out and grow. And if Nebraska has the ability to control their own finances, recruiting, talent evaluation, and then acquisition of said talent, now under new rules, good. This is back to the advantages Nebraska used to have when it came to strength and conditioning, being on TV 3 times a year, and not only strength and conditioning, but the talent evaluation and acquisition. So Nebraska needs an advantage. They've got it now through their NIL and this court ruling if they want it.
Brandon, would you say that? You remember, Brandon, when we first were talking about all this, when NIL was first kind of being spoken of, and, it transpired pretty quickly, I'd say, when all of a sudden it became real, July 21, I believe. And, Wild West, of course, right away. But at that time, when that came out, when, the Big Ten's new TV contracts came out, when the recruiting calendar and some of the recruiting rules were shifted around, remember us talking about how, man, it really seems like all of these changes truly benefit Nebraska and gets Nebraska back in the game. Well, here we are 3 years later, 2.5, I guess, 2.5 years after these sort of tectonic shifts that kind of let the blue bloods get back in the game.
Or drive them out.
Yeah. We're right. Are we starting to see that, though? Are we starting to see that with the level of talent Nebraska's able? Look at Raiola. Are we starting to see that? Are we starting to see the fruits of? Because this stuff wouldn't change overnight, of course. It's not like you just go from 3-9 Mike Riley or whatever to Natty the next year. But are we starting to see a lot of these tectonic shifts benefit Nebraska taking advantage of them?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I see it yet. It might be too early, but just to the talent acquisition part of it and thinking about it, not just from Nebraska, but broadly. And again, it's only been 2, 3, 4 recruiting cycles at this point. Is there a team that used to recruit between 15 and 25th and is now the last 3 years has been in the top 10? I can't think of one. These teams, it's really hard, I think, to kind of shake out of your traditional recruiting tier or zone. And even if Nebraska, does benefit somewhat from some of these changes in theory, I don't know that it's going to, the change is going to be pretty slight, I guess would be my point. I don't see Nebraska because it was ready to go, and it's a program and a athletic department that has, almost essentially always operated in the black. In one of our conversations with Trev Alberts, he mentioned this, and he's like, now that could be an advantage, to be a program that is financially stable, doesn't require, doesn't rely on fees, all of these various things that could play into it. But at the end of the day, Nebraska's probably going to recruit like Nebraska mostly has. You can bump that up a little bit. And I mean, some of this makes me think of Matt Rule too, like the player who's out there who's like, I'm taking these 5 official visits, whoever makes me the best offer, that's where I'm going. I don't know how many of those guys even end up on Nebraska's radar sort of for that reason. And I don't mean it's a negative. It makes that player, a bad person. Everybody's situations are different. I just don't know that it's the type of guy that Rule seeks out a whole lot. And I would suspect that will be the case continuing.
We'll get to some Husker basketball in a minute. Brandon Vogel with us from Counter Read, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. But I'm just, you said something there, Vogues, with the answer about who kind of just jumped on the scene and became good, right? How did SMU do it? With the second SMU reference this week for us with Pony Excess, right? They were sick of getting their ass kicked in the Southwestern Conference. They put a payroll together. They went and acquired talent very illegally. And they got amazing. They started winning ball games. They went 11-1 for God's sake. And then all their peers was like, dude, how are you doing it? Oh, that's right. You're doing it the way we're doing it, allegedly. And you're just better at it. So how do you get on the scene and then stay on the scene? Well, we know what SMU did. Ole Miss under Kiffin and some of the other hits and misses before Kiffin, they've kind of stabilized as a top 10 to 15 to 20 program, right? They jumped on board. Colorado really built up under McCartney because they followed the Nebraska model. And Oregon, because of the Nike backing and branding, they were able to 23 years ago finally, get Uncle Phil to really go all in. So those are about 3 or 4 programs I think of that, found their way to the Group A and stay. And you know what? It's interesting to see if Nebraska can do that again. Because of the history and the resources and the passion. I mean, all those ingredients are there. You just need someone to manage it and coach it. And it looks like the management side's there, and it looks like the coaching side's there. So Nebraska can be on that tier level again in short order. But it doesn't happen real often where you just kind of bang a peer out of nowhere, fellas, with this. But the time is now to do it. I mean, this is your window. It's open.
Yeah, I mean, the best example from a small sample size that we have of what you can do now might be that Texas A&M class that, everybody was quick to say, well, I mean, there was a system behind it that was scoring this, but the greatest recruiting class ever signed or the highest rated. And that's one where you're like, okay, that might just be the impact of these changes. Texas A&M, a school with a fiercely devoted alumni base, a lot of money, and you can get out there and be a competitor on a just financial front. And all of a sudden, Texas A&M, which I'm guessing is probably averages 9 to 15 in terms of its recruiting classes over its entire history. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden it's number one and running away from the field. That's an example, I think, of okay, this is just different. You can do this different now. And I do think, with Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M obviously had other things going on too, but say that happened to Nebraska. Just they're a powerhouse and all of a sudden they got the second ranked recruiting class in the country. It becomes one of those, I think, careful what you wish for type of things. So much of this, again, it goes back to kind of this range bound recruiting idea. Nebraska is always going to kind of be, it's not going to be Georgia, Alabama from a talent perspective, I don't think. And if it suddenly became that, does it know? Do you know what to do with that? I guess becomes the question.
So, and that's an interesting topic too, because the heyday that you have to go back to when it was all clicking for Nebraska, and they were the elite of the elite, mid 90s, right? Mid to late 90s, the most recent time that it was like that. The talent level on Nebraska's team was pretty serious. But would you say that it was still based on diamonds in the rough?
It was still fit above all.
Fit and like uber development and just clinically precise coaching. Was that still kind of the difference?
Culture. I mean, that was huge.
Yeah, it's a couple of years ago, that was kind of one of my chief obsessions in terms of research, because there were recruiting rankings prior to 2002. They were just scattered, and it was a guy in Chicago doing them and a guy in Miami doing them, and it was harder to evaluate kids obviously at a level. So Nebraska, knowing what Nebraska did recruiting wise under Tom Osborne in terms we would use today, it's a tricky thing to understand. So I think all the things you mentioned, Mark, were Nebraska's actual advantages. To the best of my knowledge, and I've looked pretty hard for all of these ratings. I would say Nebraska was higher in terms of its base recruiting level than what it's at now, but it was never 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the country. It wasn't Alabama of 1992. So the development piece of it, kind of the curveball of how Nebraska played, was part of it, but also the quality of the coaching of not just the system, but how well they were able to run it, were probably the big advantages, once we get past strength and conditioning and all those things.
And the team that might best represent that, and Brandon, I know we got to get you out. We got Gary Sharp standing by in the green room ready to jump in, but the team that may best represent that now has been Michigan over the past couple of years. You look at their 2020 class, which had guys Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, you had Zinter, you had Chris Jenkins, a lot of players that were really featured in this year's championship team and last year's college football playoff team. That was a class that did not have any 5-stars, finished number 12 in the country in the recruiting rankings, depending on where you look. Not what you'd expect whenever you think of a team that's winning the college football playoff, winning a national championship. You think of that being a top 5 recruiting class. Don't get me wrong. Very solid recruiting class for Michigan, but it was about fit. It was about development, and you see the results. That's kind of the school that represents to me how Nebraska kind of did it in the 1990s.
Superior scouting as well. Superior scouting. That also helped.
Zinter's one of the best offensive linemen in the country. It's offensive guard spot, so you might not get that represented in an NFL draft, especially given his injury. But he was one of the best offensive linemen in college football for the past 2 seasons. 3-star recruit.
Yeah,
he just hated people.
I would agree with that, Elijah. I think Michigan of the past 3 years is probably the ideal example of Nebraska 3, 4, 5 years ago. And what was that, year 6 for Harbaugh, that 2021? So it takes a while, and that Michigan, traditionally finishes ahead of Nebraska in the recruiting rankings. But to your point, they weren't Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. They weren't quite that level. So it made and then it's part of what made this past national championship game so interesting. It's because both of those teams totally broke all of the recruiting rules that we've come to kind of accept.
And I have a thought here, and Brandon, if you're willing to hang on, I'd love to get both you and Gary's thoughts on this on this recruiting topic. As we welcome the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, to the show. Gary, good morning. Good to see you. You're missing out on the hat game, but I'll throw this question to you, Brandon. We'll get you out on this. Do you think that given Matt Rule and his rebuild, what he's brought in his first 2 recruiting classes, obviously the crown jewel being a 5-star quarterback, one of the top in the country, in Dylan Raiola, do you think that what he does over the next 3 to 4 seasons with these first 2 classes will dictate what his ceiling is as the head coach at Nebraska? Because you got to get it rolling quick, especially with the talent you've brought in, to take advantage of some momentum if you do want to hop up a tier in those recruiting rankings and hop up and be one of the players in recruiting it. Because, Brandon, as you said, it's difficult to move up tiers in college football recruiting. You tend to be, you are what you are, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. In coaching tenures in general, I think those first two recruiting classes, and it's hard to know. It's still too early to know at Nebraska, but were you right in your evaluations? Was your plan what you actually then went out and executed in terms of how you're going to play and the type of players you needed? Those first two recruiting classes, I think, tell you, and it's why it's important to have success early on. Because then you don't, if that success doesn't come, then you start reaching a little bit, or you can for coaches, and things get difficult in a hurry. I mean, Harbaugh making his jump in year 6, that doesn't happen very often. A lot of coaches don't make it to 6. So those first two recruiting classes then become critical in hey, I'm going to be here 4 or 5 years to continue building on this.
Vogues, what's going on with Counter Read? Tell us how to subscribe. And I know you spent time in your Friday column on Husker Hoops.
Yeah, that'll probably be a lot in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be fun with the position Nebraska's in right now, but never a given with the Huskers. So that'll amp up in the weeks ahead. There'll be continuing some football deep dives as well. You can check that out at counterread.com. It's a twice weekly newsletter. You can sign up for free, try it out for a little bit if you'd like. And we'd also, of course, love to have anyone as a paid subscriber as well.
It's awesome. I am a proud paid subscriber, and it is just fantastic. Get my little newsletter, as Vogue said, a couple times a week, and always great content and thought-provoking for sure, and entertaining. Vogue, you take care and enjoy your Saturday, man.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Appreciate you.
Brandon.
There he is, the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us. Sharpie, what are you doing? How are you? How's the coffee?
No hat, as Elijah pointed out.
Good. No hat. I'm on the road. I'm in Kansas City.
Nice.
Are hats banned in Kansas City?
You know what? I'm traveling with a basketball team, and they're not really a hat group.
Did you get
I usually don't bring a hat on the road.
Did you make it to the Majestic Steakhouse last night down in Power and Light?
No, we went to. I hadn't been there in a while. Buca de Beppo.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
So you get the family portions for a large traveling party, and you mix in a little cheesecake at the end of the night, and you're good.
Do you plan on stopping by the World War I Museum while you're down there? I will absolutely always get up on a stump and praise that museum. One of the best in the Midwest, the World War I Museum. If you get a chance, you got to check it out, Gary. I don't know if you've seen that museum before. If you haven't, highly recommend it. I
have. I've actually been there before. I'm a big World War I and II history buff.
Same.
So it's it's fantastic. We're staying because we're playing Kansas City tonight. UMKC's campus is located off the edge of the plaza, so we're down here in the plaza.
Ooh, nice.
You guys up for maybe starting another podcast, like a war podcast,
Yes.
a World War podcast?
Absolutely.
I mean, I didn't know we all had this in common. Me as well.
I minored in history. Yeah.
Oh man.
No, we could do
classes and everything.
We could go over some of the mistakes that were made in World War I and then what happened in World War II.
Then we can tie it back to Husker football and coaching changes.
You know what? Oh, yes. I mean, was it over when Colorado beat Nebraska on Black Friday? Yeah, it was.
Hell, somewhere we need Bluto to go, hell no.
There's some comparison with football that can be made with static warfare versus mechanized warfare and how Germany really screwed up. They didn't learn from World War I. World War I kind of showed, I guess, the beginning of World War II that the static defenses of World War I weren't going to work anymore. And then they tried to defend France with static defenses. What are we doing?
What was Nebraska's moment as they were welcomed into the atomic age? Right? Little Oppenheimer, Nebraska. Yeah, there we go. Hoops, Gary. We'll get some hoops.
This podcast could work, is all I'm saying.
We'll get to some basketball and Nebraska football thoughts in the NCAA. But we were chatting about this. What's the number you feel okay about for Nebraska basketball? 3-1, 4-0, 2-2, or talk to me Monday morning, or talk to me Sunday night about 9:30 with the numbers.
Let's. So I've stopped looking at net rankings, KenPom, all of that stuff surrounding Nebraska, because Nebraska has to take care of themselves. And you can't worry about anybody else, because Nebraska's resume is not bad. And they added a little bit on Wednesday night in Bloomington. So I think Nebraska's in a good spot. I don't expect them to go 0-4. I'll tell you, tomorrow's game is going to be difficult. Minnesota looks at that game as a quad one game on the road that they're a ways away from getting into the tournament. But boy, now we're starting to look at double byes in Minneapolis and things like that. So I think Nebraska just 500 at least the rest of the way. And I think they're in. I think they have a good enough resume that it's going to hold strong. Now, again, 2-2 is probably the best case scenario to make sure that you don't get into a tension convention. But you know what? Now you guys, this team is different. We're doing a lot of comparisons between the last NCAA team, and that team caught lightning in the bottle, that last month of the season, and we all hopped on for the ride and how great it was on that final regular season day against Wisconsin. And then kind of a letdown. You go to Indianapolis, you lose to Ohio State after getting the double bye, and then the game against Baylor in the NCAA tournament. This team might be different. They just went to Bloomington. Rink Mass got 2 points and they won a game going away. I mean, that's
he was invisible.
This team's created a little bit differently, where it's a different guy every night. They've had a drop off of C.J. Wilcher of late, but the Bryce Williams of the worlds have picked it up. And then, of course, what Jamarcus Lawrence has done the last 2 games. I don't know. This is kind of turning into a fun little ride, and it may turn into a ride, guys. That if Nebraska is a double bye team in Minneapolis, I think that solidifies that Hoiberg's Coach of the Year.
Well, and that is so interesting too, considering the talk coming into this year, even last year, Hoiberg's been on the hot seat. To go from that to almost the runaway Coach of the Year, you could maybe look at Minnesota's guy. You can look at Ben as maybe being up there too, because he was counted out as well.
I think the 2 guys coaching tomorrow are the 2 leading candidates to be Coach of the Year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and what I think you've seen with Nebraska this year, even coming into it, we had talked about this, not a crazy athletic team, right? They get exposed in certain games, which we've seen this year. You're right. Right. They don't have those quick leapers like Danny Nee used to talk about back in the day, making the NCAA tournament. And you mentioned Baylor, the last team that Nebraska played where they got rolled. Different level of athleticism down in the post and some of the bigs. But you know what they do? You know what they are, though? They are super crafty. Super crafty. If you look at just sort of the IQ and kind of the deceptive sort of play styles of Mast, high IQ, really good passer. Casey just never stops running and is just looking for every little bit of leverage that he can get. Bryce Williams is sort of just steady the whole time. They have quite a few. Jawan Gary is just you want to tangle with him? Jawan Gary will knock you out. That's the vibe he gives opponents. He's the intimidator. Nebraska's got some really interesting quality veteran pieces that it just seems like it's actually starting to gel a little bit. And Gary, you being a guy that's around a basketball team a lot, it's fascinating, right? When you're around a college basketball team, because when there's a loss, it is just devastating to that team. It's devastating. And the way that they come back from it is so important. What do you see in just kind of chemistry wise, cohesion wise from this Nebraska team, granted from a bit of a distance, but what are you seeing?
I think they're connected with their head coach. It took 3 bad years before Sam Griesel and Derek Walker got together to really change Nebraska basketball, where I also think Fred took over his program. He let other people dictate a roster and what was going to happen, and then he took over the team. And I think they're connected with their head coach. They don't ride the highs and lows, I think they're a very likable team. They play hard. Now, going back to a point you made, when they're on the road and they're playing the Marylands and the Illinois, the athleticism, the lack of athleticism for Nebraska gets exposed. But I'll tell you where Nebraska is best, and they've started to play better defensively. If you look over this 3-game winning streak, they're starting to get after it. Is I think when they communicate and they play hard, then I think they have a chance. When they stop communicating and all of a sudden the perimeter gets a little bit leaky and guys are draining threes, then all of a sudden it seems to go south. I don't know. This is a fun team. I think it's a team that's connected enough, that does things well enough that you could talk about, man, in a 7 versus 10, if they get the right 7, they could possibly win a game. Now, I think they're exactly right where they should be, like a 9, 10, 11 seed in the NCAA tournament. But it's not like you're going to look at them and go, wow, they have no shot when they play another team in the NCAA tournament. I think this team could find a way to win. They just do that this year.
That's what you want in the NCAA tournament too, right? You want a veteran group. That's what Nebraska's got. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are the teams that are always the tough outs when you get your bracket and you're like, oh wait, those dudes are all like 5th-year seniors. Like, whoa, look out.
Yeah, I think one thing about the roster construction on this year's team is Fred last year saw the advantage of being old. And so there's the adage in college sports now, especially with the COVID year, is to get old, stay old. Mm-hmm. And it's not like Nebraska, outside of Bryce, has anybody that's one and done. So I think Fred's been able to retain, kind of take guys from being younger guys, which he isn't really prone to do. He's always been in his past. He likes the older guys. And if you're not developing soon enough, it probably move on from you. But he's been able to move some guys through the program where they're an older team. And I think we're going to see that in college basketball. A lot of the really good teams are older teams, whether they got, 4th-year or 5th-year transfers, or they got guys that are sticking around college basketball because of NIL, and now they're in their 3rd or even sometimes their 4th year.
And Gary, whenever you talk about that age factor, the experience factor with this Husker basketball team, is it funny that we're still talking about, 2-2 gets them in? Because it's Husker basketball fan natural reaction, I think, to go to worst case scenario.
Oh, yeah.
And do you think that this team is, I don't want to say immune from that, but do you think that experience factor and just how long guys have been playing college basketball gives them an advantage down the stretch here as they try to hold their spot on the edge of the bubble and make it into the NCAA tournament?
I think so. And I think also the head coach has taken over. I mean, you can tell some of the things he says, how much it means to him to get this team to the NCAA tournament. He's not even thinking about, they said my job was on the line. I think it's just for him to validate what he's doing is get to the NCAA tournament. Now, the other thing, guys, this team isn't losing much to next year. I mean, they're basically in a 2-year window here where if they pop this year, man, you don't know who you could attract for a spot that's open next year, a spot or two, but you're in a good area. I think it's kind of turned into a fun season. Mm-hmm. We rack our brains because that's what we do, Elijah. This as a Nebraska basketball fan. Damn, you run the roller coaster. You're waiting for that gut punch. We're waiting for that 0-4, the bottom to fall out, and they go one and done in Minneapolis, and they're subject to the NIT. That's kind of what we do. But, it's one of those things like the Nebraska basketball fan keeps coming back because there are so many reasons, even more than football, to say, nah, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. But people still keep coming back, and this year, we're getting validated for it. Like tomorrow. I think tomorrow's going to be an incredible atmosphere. I think it's going to be a great game. But it shows you it's 5:30 on a Sunday in late February. Nebraska is still alive, and there's a reason they built Pinnacle Bank Arena, to have the place packed like it will be on a late Sunday afternoon. And Nebraska has something on the line. And we're talking about a program that since they fired Danny Nee, they've been to the tournament one time. Danny Nee just didn't get fired yesterday.
No, it's been a while.
Yeah. The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us. Hail Varsity Weekend. Sharpie, we had quite the discussion about the next brave new world of college football with the NCAA, right? I mean, it was a little deep. It was a little jarring, quite frankly, this early for all of us in the morning. But it's good to hash out with how you can climb the ladder. And you can climb the ladder now with a bankroll and a fan base, and that's music to Nebraska fans, right? Because of the passion. Now you got a coach and you got an AD you combine it, good things can happen. But, I think Rule has his ways of continuing to eye talent, develop that talent, and then acquire the talent. But it's going to be a specific guy. Do you agree with that? It's going to be, as he would put it, one of us.
Well, I agree, because let me ask the three of you something real quick. If Nebraska wanted to go the way of buying a roster, do you think they could pull it off?
Totally could, but it better work the first time out. You better not screw it up, right? Where you can't come back to those investors and not deliver a playoff appearance.
I think, to me, the question is, could they buy a roster? Yes. Could they buy it to the level that Texas A&M did under Jimbo? No, probably not. There's levels to it.
Yep.
They could pull it off financially. I think there's enough money to do it. But I just think I think culturally it's not. I don't think ethanol and beef money is the same as oil money.
Exactly.
You're fair. You're fair.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just. Yeah. I just think it's a little. I think this southern U.S. is different than the Midwest, and it's just. I don't know
how you go about doing it's important.
So I think that's the thing that kind of Schmidt you're alluding to, and what you guys were talking about earlier. And this is where I think Matt Rule, who might be outside of Mike Riley, since TO, the one head coach here that really likes being the head coach at Nebraska. I didn't think Frank liked being the head coach in Nebraska, but he didn't like everything that went with it. I think Riley likes everything that comes with being the head football coach at Nebraska, or Rule does.
Boy,
and I
isn't
think that
this
goes,
fun?
And I think that goes a long way. But here's something, like there's so much pressure at Nebraska. What are we? 4 of the last 5 head coaches at Nebraska have had a losing year in year one. And some of those coaches then all of a sudden changed, like how they went about constructing a roster. You could honestly say that from the day that Rule started in November of 22 to February 24th of 2024, his roster construction idea has been exactly the same. He knows that he is sitting on some cash, but he's very selective, more on retention and reward. And he's had a plan to build a roster, and he hasn't deviated. And man, I think at a place like Nebraska, when you get knocked off the mark and all of a sudden you're 5-7 and you go, boy, we got to win. You get a little bit off of your values and your morals and what you want to do. And I think that's where Nebraska could be in a better spot right now for this 3-4 year stretch. Is the roster construction mentality is exactly the same as it was when he stood up in the Hawks Championship Center. And that's not easy to do, I think, at a place like Nebraska when you go 5-7 or you realize, man, these people want to win so bad.
That's an interesting point, though, you bring up about first guy that actually enjoys being the coach outside of Riley, who just enjoys life and a nice bicycle ride downtown. And
you have a good Riley impression, by the way. You've been working on that. You've been workshopping that.
I isn't this fun? Hey, let's go out there.
But I also think another part of what you said, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mark, is
I need to work on the impression.
The fear of failure has really driven Rule. Look at the guys that have been hired at Nebraska. Frank was off of a staff that had won national championships. Callahan just needed a friggin' job. And he was like, what is this 402 number? Hello? Oh, okay, I'll be the coach. Then, Bo had left here, came back. He was on a nice little run. Then you had Mike Riley, who was also 402. Hello? And then you had Scott Frost, who had all kinds of success coming in here. Rule really is one of the rare guys that had just really a bad taste in his mouth in his previous job. And I think that drives him. And then you combine all that together, and that's why I think Nebraska's, in a good spot before they get to playing where it matters the most, and that's games ahead of year number 2.
Yeah. And I think Rule is also just quietly just shaking his head like, see, as Carolina continues to kind of flame out.
Oh, yeah, he's being it's post Matt Rule, he's being validated for what a mess it was in Carolina. But, most people are going to look at your record and go, man, you weren't a very good football coach. Then they're going to look at the first year at Nebraska and go, what happened in November? And you can't say, well, you know what, I worked for a terrible owner in Carolina and we just didn't get it done this year. So I think he's more looking at, you know what, I have something to prove to myself and to prove to other people that I am still that football coach that was in Waco, Texas not too long ago.
Well, Gary, I want to reset this question that I asked Brandon as we got him out with you. Did the first two recruiting classes under Matt Rule, what he does with them over the next 3 to 4 years, does that determine what his ceiling is at Nebraska?
That's a great question. I know Brandon's response to it, and I really like that discussion. I think it's I'm gonna be milly mouth on this, because what did they do with Dylan Raiola's recruitment? Like, Dylan Raiola is not only benefiting the class of 24, but is he going to benefit the class of 25? Is he going to benefit the class of 26? So that's the kind of game changer. So I think it's tough to make a determination. I will say this thing about Nebraska's recruiting. So I had this discussion with Bo when Bo was the head coach, because if you went into Bo's office or kind of their war room back then, they would have the entire roster up on a board. And, they didn't really have them separated by class. Like, here's the freshmen, here's the sophomores, here's the juniors. And Bo looked at roster construction as free agency in the NFL. We could just go year by year. I look now at what Rule's staff is doing. They are looking at it as a 4 or 5 year spread out. So this year we need offensive linemen. Let's get the best of the best. Then we'll be okay next year. We still need some offensive linemen, but we don't need to just keep stockpiling. And I thought that's where Scott got in trouble, is they were so lopsided at position groups because they didn't look at it as the big picture. They looked at it from year to year. And I think Rule looking at it as the big picture of 4 to 5 years instead of treating it like free agency on how to build a roster where your position groups get lopsided and you have way too many upperclassmen, not enough underclassmen. I think that also bodes well. But just to back to your point, Elijah, I think I'm going to wait, because I think they're going to get, if Dylan does what they think he's going to do in year one and then jumps in year two, I think he recruits and completes some classes and then maybe neutralizes what you've done in the first two, because he opened the doors to go after players that you weren't able to get to early on.
Real quick, you bring up the 2022 class. Just real quick observation, Chris, and then continue. You bring up the 2023 class. I'm sorry. Rules first. 28 commits, and that includes transfers too. But just a quick cursory check. You had 15 hits in terms of contributors out of that 28. That's pretty good. Of course, it doesn't include like Judy, MJ Sherman, Billy Kemp, some of the transfers that you did get something out of, but also a lot of the younger dudes too. So 15 out of your 28 year one, you're getting something out of. That's promising sign. But continue, Chris. My bad.
No, you're good. And just there's a nice mixture, and let me know what you guys think of this, of the urgency, because no one's waiting for you to get better, but also the patience. And Rule kind of laid this out with the Reese Davis podcast about, let's just set the culture in year one. And that's the most important, cement pouring, the concrete, right? The foundation. And then let's see where we're at. And then, all right, year two, let's make a jump with eyes on the future. And the organizational side of this, Sharpie, I think, is what's so good. The guys know what to look for with football talent, and they know how to get that football talent better the way they practice. He also pointed that out. But this plan needs to come to fruition, but there's a lot of confidence in it. And I wanted to kind of get your take on his approach to Raiola, where he seems very matter of fact with, let's just see where the kid's at and not ruin him by putting all these expectations on him.
No, you have to walk that fine line, because I think he knows what a bonanza it could be if Dylan is everything that we hope he can be. But you also know that you have a kid who, you don't want to overwhelm. But then here's the thing, guys. Like, we've had a chance to watch Dylan for, a month plus. He's ready for this moment. So I don't know that you have to shield him. I think you say, hey, this kid's been around this all his life. He's ready for it, and we just let it rip. I will tell you, the feedback from all of their winter conditioning has been very positive. He's somebody who's not afraid to interject his voice. Now, he's in a room with quarterbacks where there aren't a lot of guys in there, and there's not a lot of like veteran guys. But I've heard that, in terms of when he's around the wide receivers, man, he is organizing them. And he's saying, hey, this is what we need to do when they do their throwing sessions. So I don't know, it's a balance of, we got this quarterback that we've never had at Nebraska. He needs to be good for us. We want to help him along, but we're also like, he's ready for this moment. He's embraced it. And we'll see when adversity hits, how he adjusts to the jump to college. But everything you've heard is he is fit in well, and he's very likable among his teammates. And, it's a kid that they have to move at basketball games due to security reasons, because you have so many people lining up to get his autograph that it's impeding the view of the other people around him. I mean, it's amazing.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Wow.
And you do this, guys. You go, fingers crossed that a hype player at Nebraska at least lives up to it, because we've seen this before, and at some point during their career, they get derailed.
Well, I think he's coming in. It's a different situation than when the keys were handed over to Adrian, there was so much kind of missing and wrong. And it was just kind of like, he had to shoulder a huge burden. When you think about it like this, guys, and it sounds simpler than it really is, but aren't we kind of talking about, like, if Raiola can turn it over one less time and find one more touchdown pass per game, Nebraska's 9-3, right? Like, it's not, the margin isn't huge. You don't need this guy to bail you out of every situation. Like, you need him to just hit maybe one of those deep balls that Nebraska missed last year. And you maybe also need him to not throw a pick in traffic, which happened pretty routine, or in the red zone, which happened so regularly last year, right? I mean, isn't it really just having a couple plays? Chris is just attacked by a German Shepherd on the screen, by the way. Wow. Chris, that was great. I wish we could run a replay.
You can't even hear us right now. His headphones are unplugged. Oh, that was the best.
But like Raiola, Chris takes the hit. Chris takes the hit and he stands in there and he keeps broadcasting. It's just
now we're good.
Oh, his headphones are all busted up too.
Oh, look at how upset he is. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
No, but honestly,
wow.
Oh man. So people that can't see this, Chris' headphones just
the
fell
German
apart.
strikes again.
Yes.
That's how this show's gone, from the computer crashing before we start to now Schmidt being attacked by a German Shepherd. What a Saturday morning show.
This is fantastic. Attack of the Germans, name of the show, I don't know.
That's hilarious.
That's
wrong.
The war history we're talking, that works.
I know.
Yes.
I know. Blitzkrieg.
So you guys were both talking about something amazing. What did I miss?
Well, just talking about, Adrian Martinez had to bail out. He was the representative of bailing out just a lot that was wrong with Nebraska football. Whereas it seems like now Nebraska doesn't have these glaring, ridiculous issues. They're for the most part pretty sound in most positions. And out of the quarterback room, you need one less turnover and one more touchdown pass, and you're 9-3.
Well, here's and
you're in the mix at least for a win.
We've talked about this before. This is where kind of to answer this question is, look at how Nebraska's constructed their roster once they knew Dylan was in. Okay, we got to protect him up front. We got to get a guy that he can turn and hand the ball off to when we want to run the football. And then let's get him some weapons on the outside. So let's take the onus off. He's got to win every game for us. And let's, before he gets his feet set on the ground in college football, let's have options. So it's not always the quarterback that's got to make a play. Let's recruit ourselves and develop ourselves into options that we can have a true number one wide receiver that when the ball is in first and goal in the red zone, everybody in the stadium knows the ball is going to that wide receiver and he goes and makes a play. Let's find that guy. Maybe they found it with Banks. Nayor looks like he's back to what we saw at Wyoming through the 6 weeks of winter conditioning. And then let's get guys up front to block, and then let's get a running back that can run downhill. And then you know what? When we need 15, or I'm just saying that's the number they might wear. Mm-hmm. When we need that, he's there to make a play. I mean, that's the way to do it. Instead of going, hey, Adrian, oh my God, you're coming in here. This is my first year. Just can you save us? It is the ideal. I think Mark or Elijah brought it up. It is the ideal situation for a young quarterback to come in to a program that is off of 5-7, that has pieces and a schedule that can help you in your first year, and you've got a brand new quarterback coach. It really all kind of lines up for Nebraska.
It's perfect. And when we talk about delivering on the hype, I mean, the last guy that really did, and it took a coaching change, was Sue, right? I mean, Sue was that game changer on the interior, and then Bo and Carl did their thing with him. Sharpie, I want to get your take here on Husker Baseball as you had last weekend to digest. Could have been 2-1, could have been better, but you saw some signs. Will didn't panic, and they've gotten out to a 2-0 start against Grand Canyon, who still is a team above 500, but you saw Christo probably look as good as he's looked in a long time with the Thursday night game. Nebraska got their whooping sticks out with an 11-2 win last night. They got to keep the foot down on the pedal today, but no, do you get a different vibe early from this baseball team? A confidence, a talent level, the Childress effect? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking what your observations are so far so good.
I think, and Mark will agree with me, if you look at their starting pitching over the first 5 games, that's Rob Childress. You got to throw strikes. I mean, look at Clark on Sunday against Oklahoma. He didn't throw strikes. He wasn't there very long. Yep. These guys are throwing strikes. They're working quickly. They're attacking the zone. And I think the starting pitching has been pretty good in 4 of the 5 games. I don't know. It was weird. I said the other day, guys, is it too soon to say this is kind of an important series for Nebraska? They went 1-2. They went 1-2, and I thought there were more positives than there were negatives. Mm-hmm. And you also played some good competition, so it's easier to judge where you're at. And then Will made a comment earlier this week that he thinks this can be a great team. And you went, well, this might be kind of early because this is a team that Augie Garrido is going to fall in love with. A small ball team that steals bases, put down bunts. They don't hit 97 home runs as a team like they did last year. But gosh, the first 2 games, you can't overlook. That's an impressive start out there. You're right, Schmitty. Grand Canyon was 4-0. They're an NCAA team. And Nebraska's gone out there, and because of their starting pitching, give them a shot. The bats have woken up. Karen yesterday, a couple of home runs. I don't know. It's kind of – there's so many unknowns about this team, but I think we're starting to figure it out through 5 games that this team's going to be there might be something special there, and it starts on the bump.
Yeah, and what they're getting out of that starting pitching, I don't have all the box scores in front of me, but just from recollection, I think you've gotten at least 5 1/3 out of all your starts. And then except out of those Clark. Starts, except for Clark, where did he go? 4 or something?
Clark went 2 and change.
Yep.
And did he get shelled? Or is it just sort of
he didn't get shelled. He couldn't. He was all over the place.
They tried to pull him before the shelling.
Okay.
The shelling was
3 walks.
Yeah.
Now it's early, but you've gotten 2 quality starts out of Sears. 2 really good starts out of him. And he works fast. He's a pace guy. Good tone setter. Players like to play around pitchers like that. And then Karen, I don't know if he was kind of nursing a little bit of an injury some last year, I believe, because talent-wise and the way he swings it, you expect him to have 2 home run games. Like if you see him up close,
yeah,
dude, he's built like a linebacker, and he generates some bat speed. It's a pretty solid team right now, Gary. Is it kind of like most baseball teams where, okay, that's great, you can get your good starting pitching, you can manufacture some runs, but you got to figure out your setup and your closer guys, and it might take a little bit for Nebraska to land that, right? And is that really the difference that Nebraska has to figure out? Because when they've gotten in trouble so far this year, it has almost exclusively been 6th inning and past bullpen.
Yeah, I think it's still pretty early to figure things out, but I don't know. They have a different vibe. It's you look at the couple of games that they lost in Arlington. I mean, they were right there, and they kind of had the same finish against Texas Tech and also Oklahoma. I don't know. It's refreshing that we don't have to talk about pitching. Well, we don't have to talk about guys walking and guys not throwing strikes, and all of a sudden you got runners all over the place. I don't know, but here's the thing: is you want to win a series. So you win today or you win on Sunday, you win the series 2-2. Then you're like, you lost the last 2 games of the series. See how that baseball is. So if they can win the series and get another good performance out of Walsh today, and then maybe get Clark some confidence tomorrow, boy, 2 weeks, I think you have to say, man, I think Nebraska baseball is ahead of schedule this year.
Well, Gary, you talk
with a lot of unknowns still out there. You
talk about the vibe. The vibe that I get on this team early is it's a team that really exemplifies its coaching staff. And when you look at the coaching staff, a lot of years of experience, a lot of good baseball knowledge. You have a pitching staff, as you kind of laid out, that throws strikes, gets it across the plate, trusts the defense, and competes. That's Rob Childress for you. And then offensively, it's more akin to what Will Bolt has done in his baseball career, where it's guys getting on first anyway, any shape or form, just getting there. You're advancing to second, whether it be on a pass ball, on a stolen base, whatever you're doing, you're advancing into scoring position. They're playing small ball, they're bunting guys over, and then you get timely power. That's like what Will Bolt has made his career on as a baseball coach, has been that style of offense. I think the offense represents him. I think the pitching represents Rob Childress, and I think when you combine those two things, the 2 dudes that have been in and around the game of baseball for a long time, had a lot of successful baseball teams. I think that only means good things for this Husker baseball squad if they can exemplify their coaching staff.
Don't you think it's also promising, guys? They have a lot of new faces that are playing together for the first time.
Isn't it like 24 of the 40-some? Or
I think it was 29 of the 40 had never appeared in a Nebraska baseball game before. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to turn your roster over, you got to hope that it pays off quickly. And I don't know. I think they're fun to watch. It's not taxing. And I know it's just 2 weeks into the season and we're a ways away, but man, there have been some early season Will Bolt weekends where it's taxing to watch them play. And you're like, wow, this is the same old. Well, I think it's a little different this year. And that's we talk a lot about Childress. We probably need to give credit to Will of having the confidence to let Rob run the pitching, bring Mike Sirianni in. They get a lot of attention. I'm still the head coach of the program. And look at, they're 5 games in, they're 3-2, and you could make a case that they could have 4 wins, maybe even 5.
Well, Will's comfortable enough with bringing in some really good baseball minds and not being threatened by that. And it takes someone like Will to make the tweaks and adjustments. And he made some hard decisions, Gary, to kind of not only with the roster and the new faces, but also the staff decisions. So you got hoops tonight. Are you making it back in time for Nebraska, Minnesota, the elimination game?
Yes. I know they're not a sponsor, but there's a nice little drinking hole across the street from PBA, 4:00 tomorrow. Anybody wants to get together?
I will see you there.
All right, 4:00 tomorrow. You know where we're going to be.
That'll work.
That old 76ers.
Right. Yeah. Love those guys. Absolutely, we do. A lot of NCAA tournament watch parties there. Unfortunately, not for Nebraska.
It's going to be a game played at the 25th of February tomorrow. Look at how many people will be wearing shorts. Yeah, there'll be people wearing shorts in the rail yard and in PBA tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can make it down for a beer. I might be out on the soccer fields playing some pickup soccer if all things go to plan this weekend. So, don't give me that, Gary.
Soccer
during Nebraska Minnesota basketball, you can't be doing that.
Pregame. We'll be done by tip off.
Pickup soccer.
I probably shouldn't roll my eyes. I'm sitting in a city where Sporting KC kicks off tonight in Houston, and the women's professional soccer team, the Kansas City Current, have this incredibly beautiful stadium right down by the downtown, right down by the water.
Hey, before the World Cup comes to the United States, get into soccer now.
Well, I am going to come back to the city in 26. I think if the World Cup is that close to Nebraska, you have to make an effort to go see it.
Yep.
Regardless if the U.S. is playing or not, I don't care. Just to say I went to a World Cup game.
All right.
I'm signed up on like the ticket thing where, you're going to get access to tickets, lottery system, I'm assuming. I just hope it's like Argentina and Italy and Spain and, some legit teams. Don't give me like, don't give me like New Zealand and.
If I remember correctly, this is the World Cup with the expanded field, so you're going to have some more teams that you might not know a single person on the field. But I want to see England. I want to see France. Italy, I could care less about. Sorry, Italy. Would love to see, as you said, Argentina, if Messi makes it for another World Cup.
Brazil, Colombia. Like, bring me some teams that got some stuff to them.
Don't care.
Give me
are you just rattling off countries that you visited?
No. I just want to see, teams that have had superstars in their heyday.
Okay, here's
still have them.
Here's one. Go check out South Korea. Fun fan base, fun team. It could be fun. They just played really well in the Asian Cup, and we'll see what they look like in 2 years. South Korea could be a fun team to watch in the World Cup if you get a chance.
Okay. Is the U.S. going to have their stuff together? I just feel like it's, people get the USMNT gets, handily criticized.
The problem with the U.S. men's national team is they fired their coach and then couldn't find anybody better, so they brought him back with Berhalter. That's a weird situation. I don't know if he'll still be the coach for the World Cup.
But they brought him back?
Yeah, it was very strange. They put an interim head coach in place, and then they just brought him back, which was one of those things that made me go, "Oh God, it's the U.S. men's national team." But
hey, how about that? How about that John Walker extension?
Talent-wise,
it works.
Talent-wise, the U.S. men's national team, it's a golden era. This is the best conglomeration of talent the U.S. men's national team has maybe ever had. They just got to put it all together.
Who are the two guys we got to know?
Christian Pulisic.
Who are the two guys?
Gio Reyna.
Claudio Reyna's son.
Yeah. And there was
a whole controversy with that whole thing, right? And that's one reason why the coach got fired, right? Is because of like favoritism and
he wasn't
really soccer like. It was like a really it was like
basically Claudio Reyna came in and was trying to go. I can't say that. I can, but I won't. He was trying to go power play to get his son more playing time, and the coach was like, no. So he just benched him for the entire World Cup back in 22, and it was not good for the team.
It was like perfect soccer pretentiousness, like playing out. It just.
What team flops the best?
What are we talking about?
Shut up.
No, I'm serious.
It's Mexico. It's absolutely Mexico.
All right. I can't wait to watch Tominaga tomorrow.
How about Brennan? How about Brennan in the stream right now? Well, that's it. That's the end of the show. As soon as he goes soccer. Hey,
Chris was about to bail out too. Chris is my guy.
No, Chris is bailing out. We will talk to you guys next time.
Thank you.
With the weekend edition of Hail Varsity, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Sharpie, we love you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Brandon Vogel. Thanks to Elijah for getting the computer up and running, even though a couple of minutes late.
The people have spoken.
Yeah, they hate soccer talk. That's okay. I understand it's not for everybody, but hey, if you can't get behind the U.S. men's national team, that's on you.
It is. We're not going to spend any more time. I love the U.S.
Oh, you want to talk about? Okay.
I'm going to head out. You guys can keep on doing your thing if you want.
We don't want to talk about the complexities of the 4-3-3 and compare it to playing 3 at the back. Like,
don't care.
That's the question with the U.S. national team. No, I'm done.
Both of you can enjoy your soccer time. Kraynak, let me know if you're coming down from Minnesota.
Okay, I will. I have football camp. I don't know if I can make it. Not for me. I'm not playing. Yeah, Don't worry about that.
If you want to put off some pickup soccer and come on down, it's all good. But all good. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Hail Varsity, YouTube.
What was that, Mark?
Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. And good stuff today with Hail Varsity. Back at you Monday at 4. Thanks for tuning in.
I mean, pick up soccer?